Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Boston Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut. Um, it's finally spring. Happy spring, everybody. I feel like this winter, at least for here in the Northeast, was actually not as bad as we typically get. I hope I'm not jinxing that and that we don't have a really bad April. Fingers crossed, but it was awesome the last couple days. I was sitting outside getting some work done. I could smell one of my neighbors grilling something outside too. So that definitely made me feel like it's spring, which is super exciting. I hope you're all having a great week. I'm excited to bring you another episode of the show. March Madness obviously is here, and it's been madness for sure. It's been absolutely crazy. I don't know, how many people's brackets are still alive at this point. There's so much to get into. I'm excited to have a special guest with me on the show who, has a UConn podcast, the Connecticut Scoreboard podcast, is a huge UConn fan like myself, definitely is super knowledgeable about college basketball and passionate about it. So definitely couldn't think of anybody better to have on this episode. Jared Kotler, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me. And yeah, I hope you're right about spring being here. I'm ready for the warm weather. Get through the last couple weeks of March here, and we'll be good to go.
Yeah, I mean, I was even talking to my friend the other day, and I was just saying, just in general, how little snow we got this winter was
Yeah,
actually kind of crazy to think about.
yeah, it really was, and I'm certainly not complaining about that.
Yeah, me either. I'm definitely with you on that. I'm not a big fan of snow, but like I said, I really appreciate you joining me on the show this evening. Definitely a lot to talk about. Before we kind of dive into all of that, I do want to get, just to know you a little bit. Can you talk
Yeah,
about just kind of, how your podcast got started, and just, how it's going in general?
yeah, no, it's been great. About 3 years ago, right before COVID started, thought of the idea of doing a podcast that focused on all things Connecticut sports. And while people might not think there's a ton going on in Connecticut sports, there really are. Whether it's UConn, the other colleges here, we've got the WNBA team, the Connecticut Sun, got the Yard Goats, bunch of athletes too who have come from Connecticut. So a lot of different people to be able to speak to. And I've been lucky to really grow it over the past few years. With UConn being really good this year, it's been great too, getting to dive into that a little bit more. People have really been interested and have been tuning in more, thanks to some of the name, image, and likeness stuff now with college athletes. I'm able to have Alex Caravan, who's on the UConn basketball team, come on a couple times a month to give some insight into the season. So it's been really cool getting to be able to work a little bit more with the athletes and really dive in there too.
Yeah, that must be really cool too, getting his perspective, especially with the season that UConn's had this year, and just be able to hear from him about, how what it's like for the team and how they go into every game and what their mindset is like, and being able to really get that perspective. Because obviously, when you're
Yeah,
watching the game as a fan, you don't get that same experience.
yeah, no, it's been really cool, and he's been great. He's been really open, gives some really interesting insight, and as you know, this season's had its ups and downs, and hasn't shied away when things were going tough. Talked through those times, has talked through the highs. So we're hoping that we'll be talking into early April at least.
Yeah.
Knock on wood there.
Yeah, I mean, fingers crossed on that. Obviously it's you never know what can happen in March, but this team has
Yeah.
certainly been, fun, and I'm sure it's fun for him to be able to talk about it. How were you able to kind of get that set up with him?
Yeah, so I'm very lucky. I have a sponsor of the podcast, the Boneyard Huskies Club. They created these NFTs and collectibles around UConn men's basketball players, and them having a relationship already with Alex helped put me in touch. And we've been able to get things going through the start of the season. I did the same thing with Jackson Mitchell of UConn football, Cheyenne Sprecher, who is the goalie on the field hockey team. So it's been cool getting to use those connections, have a number of athletes on and really get to hear from them. So it's been cool. It's definitely one of the more exciting parts of the podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can definitely imagine. It's always good to get different people on too, and just be able
Yeah,
to, get different thoughts from different people and different viewpoints. That's why even with my show, I just try to bring a lot of different types of guests on too, just to get,
yeah.
different opinions from different people.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so cool. Good for you. It seems like you've really been
Thanks.
able to, develop a following on it and grow the show, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, no, it's been fun, and I'm sure you probably have a similar experience to it in getting to build it and grow your podcast here, and it's fun to see. At first when I started, I'm like, yeah, maybe 5 people will listen, and hey,
Yeah.
5 people listen, 5 people listen. And now to see people actually like interact with it and share it and stuff, it's really cool to see that work pay off.
Yeah, no, me too. I was like, when I started my show, I was like, nobody's gonna listen to this. Like, who wants to listen
Yeah,
to me talk about,
exactly.
sports all
Yeah,
day? Like, nobody's gonna, take the time to listen to it. But I've been definitely pleasantly surprised at how many people on, Twitter or other social media that are reaching out. Like, I love your show because it feels good.
yeah,
It
it
reminds
does.
you
It
why you
does.
do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's great. I really like that. Good for you. And obviously,
Thanks.
growing up, UConn sports fans, it's, obviously back in the Calhoun days, it was
Yeah,
fun being a UConn fan. And obviously, with the women for years, it's been fun
yeah,
being able to watch them. And obviously, football has had its, struggles as of
yeah.
recently, but this past season, being able to get to a bowl game was awesome. I
Exactly.
love
Yeah.
Mora. I think he's a great coach. I think that the program's,
Agreed.
heading in an upward trajectory that way.
Yeah, no, it's been really exciting, and I think as much as the football team in particular struggled, it's only made this past season more rewarding and really fun to follow. I think we get a little bit spoiled from the basketball side and having teams that are really good, and kind of having to go through some of the lower lows with football and working on building that up. I think I think when you're a fan, it's something you actually kind of like. You obviously don't like losing and don't like what comes with it at the time, but as you get to see it get built up into what it is now and what it'll continue to grow into, it's really exciting.
It absolutely is, for sure, yeah, and obviously, that Husky pride runs deep for a lot of
Yeah,
us, so it's definitely fun from that standpoint, but yeah, I mean, speaking of fun, UConn basketball this year has had a really good season. Like you said, there's definitely been ups and downs. I think
yeah,
we've seen some inconsistency, which has been a little bit frustrating. There were a couple tough losses in there this season during the regular season, games that they probably should have won or teams they faced that we thought that they could have beaten and they should have. But
for
then,
sure.
they also had some great wins during the regular season too. And we saw the team that we're seeing right now at the beginning of the season. And I was like, wow, if they continue to play like they're playing right now, they have a chance to go all the way this year. And I think a lot of people felt that way, but then they started to struggle when they got into Big East play. And people were
Yeah,
wondering, are they for real or are they just, a team that started
yeah,
off hot and can't really compete with the big guys? But they're definitely showing that they can. So obviously, I definitely want to hear your thoughts on kind of, the first two games of this tournament, how they went really for UConn. Because for me,
yeah.
it was definitely exciting to watch, but there definitely was some frustration when it came to especially the last game and the first half in
Yeah,
particular.
no, yeah, no, I've been pretty impressed with how they played so far in the tournament. The first halves in both games have been a little bit of a struggle. And I think partly just because Jordan Hawkins, who's such an important piece for this team, has gotten off to some slower starts where, he hasn't been able to hit the shots that he normally hits. It's not very often that he goes 0-4 and a half. And then he got into some foul trouble in that second game against St. Mary's. Um, but overall, as a whole, like you've got to be really happy and impressed with this team. I mean, the big guys in Adama Sanogo and Donovan Clingan have been phenomenal, really providing that 1-2 punch. Tristan Newton's been good. Andre Jackson has been great. And what we've seen is Jordan Hawkins, while he might not be doing much in the first half, in these second halves, just gets on fire. And the next thing you know, this game goes from a 3 or 4 point game and then it's at 15. And that's what you saw with this team during that hot stretch when they started the season is all of a sudden this team would go on like a 12-0 run or a 13-4 run. And next thing you know, the game's kind of out of reach, especially depending on who they're playing. And I think what was interesting about these first two games is they played two teams that have completely different styles of how they want to play. I mean, Iona wanted to pressure them, get them up and down the court, play a little bit quicker and a little bit more of a frantic pace, whereas St. Mary's wants to use, 29.9 seconds of the shot clock every time, really grind you out and make you work. and UConn showed they could win both of those games and win them both relatively easily. So, as you mentioned, if they could play like they've played of late, there's no reason to think that this team can't win it all, especially as paths start to open up. I mean, they don't know how it'll all work out, but, just from a seeding and overall perspective, you'd probably rather play an 8 seed in Arkansas than play the number 1 seed in the defending national champions in Kansas. But, at the end of the day, Arkansas is hot. They won that game, so you never know what you're going to get. But, at the end of the day, as paths start to open up, you start to think that, this team really can make a run, especially if they keep playing. So I'm going to be really interested to see what happens tomorrow night against Arkansas there.
Yeah, when I was closely monitoring that game, the score of that game, just the Arkansas-Kansas game to
Yeah.
see, how that game was going. I was checking the score constantly of that game because I was like, wow, like I feel like it would be a lot better for UConn if Kansas loses this game. Because granted, that game obviously was before UConn played St. Mary's. So I
Yeah.
was like, okay, well, Arkansas won this game. Like let's try to please beat St. Mary's tomorrow. And then I think I would rather play Arkansas because, like you said, obviously with Kansas, they have the experience. They just won the whole thing last year,
Yeah.
and there's a reason they were a number 1 seed. So going into a game like that, I'd be really nervous for that matchup. I think capability wise, UConn is there with Kansas, but I definitely would feel a little bit more nervous about Kansas being able to, capitalize on mistakes.
For
Whereas
sure.
when it comes to Arkansas, I think that's going to be, a good game. I think it's going to be a close matchup. I think it's going to be closer than what we've seen in the first 2 games. I think it'll be a good, matchup for UConn. And like you said, they're playing really good basketball right now. So it'll be a fun game tomorrow for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely looking forward to it. Definitely gonna be a fun matchup.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned this too, because this was something I wanted to bring up. Jordan Hawkins is so important to this team. I've been
Yeah.
saying all season that he is just so key and is the difference maker for this team because we saw how quickly things changed in the second half when he started to heat up, and it was a little bit scary and also really frustrating when he was pretty much non-existent in the first
Yeah.
half of those games because it also happened in the Big East tournament game against Marquette too, where he was,
Yeah.
struggling then too. And you really see how much of a difference he makes for this team when he's hitting his shots and he's, out there and playing good basketball because I truly believe that they're a different team when he's playing his best.
Yeah, I mean, he's the guy who's probably going to be a top 20 NBA draft pick. So, if you could get something out of him early, I mean, it really bodes well for UConn if, and I'm sure Dan Hurley and the coaching staff's been working to draw up a few plays to try to get him going early, at least tomorrow. I think I saw he was on First Take today and they were talking about this too with him. He was talking about trying to get these starters off to a bit of a better start. So, they're not kind of fighting back that whole first half or trailing at the half. So it'll be interesting to see what adjustments are made. And, you never know what's going to happen in these games. It's a complete crapshoot, kind of.
It's so true. I was on the edge of my seat during halftime of both of those games because I was like, this is
Yeah,
way too uncomfortable of a feeling for me right now.
exactly. Exactly.
But I think, though it's UConn succeeds, when they go on runs when it's hard for other teams to stop that because I feel
Yeah.
like that's how they found a lot of success this year because they do not do well in close games at the end. They've lost a lot of games this year that were close that came down to the wire. So those are the types of situations where I would worry more so about them being able to close out games if it's really close down the stretch and you know, they're maybe down by 2 or 3 and there's the clock's winding down in that type of situation. I don't know if they would I don't know how confident I would feel in them being able to make that big shot at the end of the
Yeah.
game.
Yeah, in some ways, I think they're kind of due for one of those games where they
Yeah.
do, pull out a close game, and I guess the somewhat counter to that is they've kind of struggled in close games because those have been the ones they've lost in the other wins they've had. They've just beaten up these teams to the point that it hasn't had to be a close game. You would expect, hey, like you play Alabama, that's a great win. They're the overall number 1 seed. But it wasn't a close game. So people don't necessarily throw it in that, hey, like they struggle in these close games. Well, it's because they beat them by 15.
Yeah, which
So
was so fun, by the way. That was one of the
yeah,
best games of the season.
yeah, exactly. So it'll be interesting to see. I think you saw definitely in that Marquette game in the Big East semis, they had multiple chances to put that game away, win it late. Just were a little scattered, but yeah, we'll see what happens. March is a time where these guys hopefully show up. So if it's a close one tomorrow night, hopefully Jordan or whoever it is able to hit that shot that they need at the end.
Yeah, I would also, trust Caravan to make a big shot
Yeah,
at the end. He when he's on fire, he doesn't miss. And it's really fun
yeah,
to, watch him be able to hit those shots from deep because, I love Joey too, but he is inconsistent. Like he needs to
yeah.
start making shots and be able to, be in the zone and then he'll consistently make those. But there's quite a few times where he can't really hit anything either. So Caravan's somebody that I feel like I would trust if you need somebody to hit one of those big shots at the end because he's shown that he can make big shots in,
For sure.
crunch time situations.
Yeah, and then I think that's one of the advantages this team has is they've got so many different pieces that they can kind of move in and out on any given night. If someone's hotter from three than someone else, you drop some plays for them. Whether it's Naheem Aline, Caravan, Joey, Jordan. I mean, you Tristan, you got a number of guys that you could kind of go to depending on who's got the hot hand that night. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that all that kind of stuff plays out.
Yeah, Aline, I've been so proud of him this year. I feel like his confidence has really gone up this year. And, he doesn't need to play a lot of minutes in games for
No,
him to
yeah.
be impactful, which is something I really like about him because it's not like he's, playing a ton of minutes out there, but you remember the minutes that he does play because he's been making an impact, especially as of late when he is out there.
Yeah, I think it was probably hard for him coming from Virginia Tech, having to adjust to a new team, new system, and a new role because he was starting there. So to now come off the bench and kind of figure out what's expected from you, how you fit in with the group that's out there now. And it seems like it took him a little bit of time, but now he's looking really comfortable in that role. And a guy that this team can count on is a big piece for them.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been great. I like him a lot. I'm a big fan of him. And then also, the other thing that has kind of been talked about throughout the season on UConn Twitter that I'm interested in getting your opinion on is the balance of playing time between Sonogo and Klingon because I have
Yeah,
seen, situations on Twitter where people are saying, Klingon should be playing more because the team looks better when he's out there and obviously from a rebounding standpoint, he's super impactful. But Sonogo is one of the best players in the country right now too. So I think it's
yeah.
obviously from a depth standpoint at that position, it's a good problem to have that they have both. But I am curious your thoughts on how Hurley's kind of been managing the two this year.
Yeah, it's a really tough predicament. I don't think anyone necessarily thought Donovan would be able to contribute at the level that he has so far this year. But you see what Sonogo's done these past two games in the tournament, and it's like I think I saw it's like no one outside of Blake Griffin in 2008 or whenever it was like performing at the points in rebound level that he performed at last weekend. So it's like how do you not play that? And I think they've kind of found this nice mix and match balance now where, Sonogo's out there for the start. Then you give him a little bit of a spell in the first half with Donovan coming in for, 6-7 minutes. Sonogo back in, then Sonogo starting the half, Donovan coming in for another stretch. Because as dominant as they both are, they both kind of bring a little bit of some different things to the table. Like Donovan's going to be more of that rim protector, kind of alter things a little bit more, whereas Sonogo's just more of that like power guy who can bully you down. So it's really hard to prepare for the two of them. And I think in some cases, especially towards the end of the season, you saw they started playing Donovan a little bit more, maybe if Adama was struggling and kind of alternating those two there. So I think, again, it's something where you kind of ride the hot hand, play some matchups a little bit. But at the end of the day, Sonogo's shown you what he could do. He's been there for a while. He's been through it all. And I think best part about having Donovan off the bench, not only what he can do, but is giving Adama a chance to get a little bit of rest, be fresh for those second halves. Because I mean, if you have him with fresh legs at the end of the game, it's only going to help this team.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, that balance is something that Hurley was trying to figure out at the beginning of the season, and he wasn't really sure how much he should utilize Donovan
Yeah,
and how to really go about that situation. But obviously Sanogo does need the rest too. And it's great that you can bring in, Donovan
yeah,
and just that power force to come into the game. You
exactly.
give Sanogo that time on the bench so he's not feeling like he has to play the full game. And I think that's something that UConn has that they really can hone in on and take advantage of in the rest of this tournament. That is a strong suit of them that not every team really has the luxury of having.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, it's a big time bonus for him.
Yeah, and I think in general also Hurley has done a lot better lately with making adjustments during games
For
because
sure.
earlier on, it didn't seem as much like he was making a whole lot of halftime adjustments during games, but we've seen as of late more. I think he's really trying to do that a lot more. And you see a lot, a lot of different things happening in the second half based on what he saw in the first half, which was something I kept hoping to see out of him more this whole season. And I feel like he's been doing a lot more of that lately.
Yeah, I think you've seen whether it's switching up and going zone defense on some teams, throwing some different lineups out there. Yeah, no shortage of adjustments there, and sometimes the adjustment is even just drawing a few different plays up for Jordan and getting him hot, or getting things going that way. Because I mean, you've seen these past two games, whether it's Rick Pitino, who's already a Hall of Famer, or Randy Bennett, who's at that level. He's kind of carved them up and torn them up in the second halves when it mattered. So yeah, for the crowd that's thinks he's been a little bit slow on adjustments, I think he's started to prove those people wrong, especially the past few games.
Yeah. Do you think that if UConn had lost in the first round again this season, that he would potentially have been on the hot seat?
Um, no, I mean it definitely would have been warmer, and people would have been frustrated because at UConn you don't want to be losing the first round of the tournament 3 years in a
No.
row. But I mean, this tournament is just so fluky. It's so hard. I mean, the first loss to Maryland, 7-10, that's like almost a coin flip game. It was in the COVID bubble. It was just a weird game. Then last year, some guy that no one's really heard of goes off for
Yeah,
37.
which is ridiculous.
And everyone else is pretty much shut out of that game or held to relatively low numbers, but that guy beats them. Those things happen in this tournament. I mean, if just ask Purdue what's happened to
I was
them
gonna
over the
say,
past
like,
few years. So yes, the pressure would have been there and people would have been upset. I mean, I don't think anyone would have been thrilled. But I think he kind of put those questions to bed this year. It's new team, new way, new attitude, and they've shown what they could do.
yeah, I've always been a fan of Hurley. I mean, I love just his emotions and his facial expressions that he puts in during games. You can tell he's really
For sure.
passionate
Yeah.
about it. And I've never really had a problem with him, but I know there were people who were starting to get a little bit frustrated. But I think a lot of the people who were starting to not have faith in this team as the season was progressing and they were struggling with in-conference games, sometimes some of those people are starting to believe in this team again.
Yeah, and I think it's hard when you compare this to years past. And I mean, 2011, 2014, they weren't necessarily expected to do extremely well in the tournament, and then they go win the tournament. So the pressure gets escalated. And I mean, people forget that Calhoun lost in the first round too a few times. It happens. It's the nature of the NCAA tournament. No one's going to run through these tournaments and never lose. It's just how it works. So sometimes it's got to be a little bit patient, and the results will be there. Get the right matchups, things like that. It's fluky, and at the end of the day, though, I'm really glad for Dan and his staff that they were able to kind of get that monkey off their back in terms of being able to get out of the first round and move on to the Sweet 16 relatively easily too.
Exactly, yeah, because when you look at the final score of those games, neither one ended up really being close. So
Yeah,
that was another thing too that I think really helps that narrative for UConn that they are the real deal and they have a real shot this year.
yeah. When you look at the scores from outside of the tournament, even the better ranked seeds have struggled with teams, and it's been tough to put teams away. Whereas within the first 5 to 6 minutes of these second halves, UConn's kind of run teams off the court.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah, which is fun for me to watch.
Yes,
Absolutely, I get
yes,
so
I'll take
excited,
it
I'm, like,
any day.
screaming at my TV, but it's, like, a good screaming. Um,
Exactly.
but, yeah, I mean, speaking of Purdue, I mean, there's been some crazy things that have happened in this tournament. That's why they call it March Madness. It's so fun. I mean, people just, you don't really know what to expect. And like you
Yeah.
said, any team can come out on any day and just outplay the other team. That's why they play these games. And I feel like it's so cool when you have, these 15 or 16 seeds that are coming into the tournament really playing with nothing to lose because they're like, we're
Yeah.
just happy to be here. And the pressure isn't on them as much to win the game. So then you come and you see a school like Fairleigh Dickinson who comes out of nowhere and wins that
Absolutely.
game
Yeah.
against Purdue. And it's like, obviously, like you said, Purdue's recent history in the tournament has not been good. But I did not have them going super deep in my bracket because I just felt like they weren't as strong of a team
Yeah.
overall as they might have seemed like they were this season. But I definitely did not have them losing in the first round.
No, I didn't either. I didn't either. They had showed they were a little bit flawed towards the end of the season. It struggled a little bit, but I don't think anyone, or at least most people, unless maybe you're a Fairleigh Dickinson alum, thought they'd lose in the first round.
That might have been the matchup that made that small percentage of perfect brackets go to zero.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
And then Princeton, because
Yeah.
obviously I thought this craziness, like, because obviously Furman beating Virginia was the start of all of that madness, and people
Yep.
were like, how did Furman win? Like, I definitely didn't have them winning in my bracket, but Virginia's one of those teams I've never really been able to fully trust when it comes
Yeah,
to
no.
my brackets, because they, again, also from their history, it's hard to kind of get behind them making a deep run.
Yeah, it is, and I think in this tournament too, when you play as one of these teams like Virginia, where they try to slow the game down a little bit, heavy focus on defense. They're not always the most offensively talented team. Really lessens your margin for error there, where teams hit a few more shots than they might normally make. You miss a few more, and the next thing you know, you're out of this tournament. So it's kind of the fun and the tough part of March Madness there.
For sure, yeah, because even Furman wins, and I'm like, all right, we have our first big upset of the tournament. And then that same day,
Yeah,
Princeton beats
Princeton.
Arizona, and I'm like, Princeton coming out of nowhere, into this tournament as a 15 seed,
Yeah.
and then they beat Arizona, and then they win again in the second round, and now they're all of a sudden in the Sweet 16, which I definitely would have never expected.
Yeah, exactly. It's just goes to show you how crazy this tournament can be.
Yeah, and then obviously Kansas going down. I mean, that was Arkansas is a good team, so it's not
Yeah,
like Kansas, went down to a 16 seed, but
right.
they Arkansas is a good team, but I still thought Kansas, you know, would have won that game. I did have in my main primary bracket Kansas losing to UConn in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, no, it was a tough one for Kansas, and you don't know the impact that not having their head coach during these games, had on the team. I know he was recovering from some surgery there, so he wasn't with them. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I think I'm trying to like pull up the stat here and see if I can see it, but I think Kansas missed a ton of threes in that game against Arkansas compared to what they normally would make. And that's what happens here. You have an off night and it's one and done, and kind of there goes your season. So just I think it just shows what the whoever's ultimately able to win it, how tough it really is to win this tournament, because you really do have to be on every game you play.
Yeah, it is heartbreaking too to just, see some of the players' faces and see like the fans' faces when you
Yeah,
know that, the team isn't going to win that game. And it's just tough to see situations like that too. Because when a team gets eliminated, especially for like, the seniors or people who it's their last season on the team, it's tough to
it's tough.
swallow
Yeah.
that pill when you're in like the final seconds of, the season.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, no, it's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, it really is. But yeah, I mean, even with the bracket now, looking at some of the games that are still to come, I think it's going to be a really fun Sweet 16. I think,
Yeah, you've got
some
a
of
lot
the
of great
really,
matchups.
really good matchups that I'm already, you know, pinpointing at. I think Gonzaga UCLA is going to be a fantastic game. I think that one
Yeah.
really could go either way because those are both very, very tough teams.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think, obviously being UConn fans, we've got that game, the UConn game circled as our number one game of the week. But I think, uh, a close second is that Gonzaga UCLA game, because those teams, they're evenly matched. They played in the tournament before, had a really good one. And both have had fantastic seasons. Play a little bit of a different style too, whereas UCLA is going to lock them down defensively a little bit more, and Gonzaga's got a really potent offense. So you throw those two together, I think that makes for a really exciting matchup. Going to New York and getting Kansas State and Michigan State is always fun with Tom Izzo and his teams in March. And then you've got Kansas State, who really hasn't been there in a while. First time head coach, some really exciting players there.
I
That's
actually
another
like
one.
Michigan State to win that game, strictly based more on experience.
Yeah, agreed. I think that one's going to be really good. And another one I have circled, and then probably third on my list is Texas Xavier. See how the Big East does, and Texas is a team that I have in the Final Four, so I'm very curious to see how that matchup plays out. Both those teams are really good as well. It's the time of the year where pretty much every game you get should hopefully be a good one.
Yeah, I mean, Creighton most likely will win their game.
Yeah,
Again, I mean, you never know, I
you
guess,
never
because
know.
Princeton
Yeah,
surprised
we've seen what
everybody,
Princeton
but
could do. Yeah.
I feel pretty confident in Creighton winning that game.
Yeah,
Um,
agreed. And I think Creighton's starting to show, the team that people thought they were heading into the season, before things started as a top 10 team. And right now they're in Sweet 16. So showing that they're probably living up to what people thought early on.
yeah, I'm glad we have 3 Big East teams representing.
Yeah.
I was a little bit surprised about Marquette losing,
Yeah, I
um,
was too.
when they did. I thought they would make a deeper run than they did.
Yeah, I did too. Shaka Smart's a good coach. Marquette looked really good. What you saw out of them in the Big East tournament. But again, one of those nights you go up against a team that's playing really well. You have a little bit of an off night and you're bounced. So 3 out of the 4 teams in the second weekend moving on, though, is a really good weekend for the Big East. And I think we've got a couple favorable matchups here. So we'll see how that plays out heading into the Elite Eight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, obviously Providence, I had Providence losing in the first round in my
I did
bracket
too.
too. I kind of thought that Kentucky would handle them.
Yeah,
But
agreed. I felt the same way, and we were proven right on that one at least.
yeah, no, I think there's going to be some really good games here for sure. I mean, I think Alabama is going to beat San Diego State. I think Alabama is really showing, very few weaknesses right now. I think they're playing really good basketball. They obviously, be interesting if
Yeah.
obviously everything aligns and UConn meets Alabama again. Uh that would be fun, but
Yeah.
I think they win that game, and then Houston I feel pretty good about, but some of these games I think could go either way for sure. I mean, Tennessee FAU I think could actually go either way.
Yeah, you never know. I think everyone thought Tennessee was one of those teams that could have gotten upset early. They play slow. They're down a player that they lost for the season with injury, and instead they kind of proved everyone wrong. Beat Louisiana, really beat up Duke, and
Yeah.
kind of bullied their way around there. But FAU showing that they don't want to be messed with either. So I think that's a game that could be really interesting to see. I mean, FAU won 33 games. They've won 33 games already. So not a team to look lightly at. So
Ew.
yeah, that's another one tomorrow too on Thursday night. It's a really good slate tomorrow with FAU, Tennessee, UConn, Arkansas, Gonzaga, UCLA, Kansas State, Michigan. I
It's
mean,
awesome.
get the couch ready to sit on all night.
Right? Literally, like, when these games are on, like, last weekend, I really, like, barely moved from my couch, like,
Yeah,
basically to, like, make food or do, like, necessity
exactly.
type stuff, but tomorrow night, my plan is to just, park it on my couch and watch basketball.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the same exact way.
But, yeah, no, it should be super fun, and then, obviously, the UConn women are obviously
Yeah.
they every year we can expect to be a 1 or 2 seed, most likely. I think they haven't been fully healthy all season. They've obviously had their struggles more so than we're used to generally seeing them, but
Yep.
they've just had so many injuries this season, but they've, come back and are, pretty much like almost fully healthy at this point, and we've been waiting to, I think having AZ Fudd back is huge for them, and I think,
Oh, for
Aaliyah
sure.
Edwards is having a really good season, and I think they're, they're fun. They're just definitely
They
a team that if they again, I think have a chance to go to the national championship. I think if they still had some of these key players injured, wouldn't say the same thing, but I think the fact that they're mostly healthy now is good for them.
Yeah, I think I agree wholeheartedly. Really fun team to watch, and I think again that some of the matchups have worked out in their favor. The way the bracket came out, getting Virginia Tech, who's a good team and the 1 seed there, but they really haven't been there before. So, you see what UConn and their experience can do there. Play an Ohio State team next that struggled with North Carolina. I think that game went to overtime there, and they just squeaked that out. Stanford's already been upset. So it's going to be interesting
Yeah,
to see how these all play out. Indiana got upset, so 2 of the 1 seeds already knocked out of the women's tournament, just like in the men's. So yeah, both of these tournaments have really delivered this year, and really exciting for fans to watch.
Yeah, it's cool to see that because I feel like in the women's you don't see as many upsets as you see in the men's as much. So I was watching the end of that Stanford game and I was like, wow, like if they actually lose this game, that's going to be so interesting. So the fact that there's two
Yeah,
1 seeds gone already makes it, almost better for UConn if they, continue to play good basketball. They are probably considered one of the favorites.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it starts to bode nicely for them. So hopefully they can keep winning. What do they play Saturday? I think
Yeah, I
toward
think they play Saturday.
Saturday. So yeah,
So
might
we
have a
might get
double
both
might
the
have a
women
double
and
header
men's
on
teams playing
Saturday.
that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if for your brackets, like who do you have winning the whole thing?
So on the men's side, it's always tough because I want to go with my heart, but also maybe try to win these brackets as well.
Yeah,
So in one of them, I went with Texas.
that's a good choice.
I think outside of UConn, that they're a team that's really impressed me this year. Um, but I do have UConn in the Final Four. And then, on the women's side, I do have UConn taking it all there.
Yes.
And just because I have Texas, I mean, I don't care about my bracket anymore. I'm not going to win anything anyways. So obviously, always pulling for UConn. And since that's already been shredded, who cares? Texas could lose tomorrow, and I'll be happy because it knocks them out of it, and UConn won't have to worry about possibly facing them. So yeah, it's fun this time of year, and it's always tough to kind of balance that head versus heart and what you want to do with your team there.
Yeah, exactly. I struggle with that every year, like when it comes to UConn versus everybody else. Because even this year, I was like, do I want to put UConn to win the whole thing? Because obviously that is my team and that's who I'll be rooting for the whole way. But I'm like, or do I
Yeah,
want to play this in a way where like I genuinely put who I think will win the whole thing? And then like
yeah,
that I can, win these brackets, like you said. But once my brackets get busted, I'm like, all right, whatever. Like now I'll just root for whoever I want to root for.
yeah.
So now I'm rooting for
Now it's just
UConn.
chaos. Yeah, chaos and UConn. That's all we need.
Yeah, chaos. I love the chaos. I'm all for it. I'm all for the
Yeah,
chaos. Like that's what I want. That's like I was like I want to see like some of these teams go for it that people wouldn't expect. Like I said, I don't expect Princeton to beat Creighton, but how crazy would that be if
yeah.
they end up in the Elite Eight?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. Let's see it happen.
It's like they might as well at this point because I'm like it's not like my bracket can help me anymore anyway. So it's like why
Exactly.
not root for upsets like that? Do you
Yeah,
root for
exactly. Same way.
Do you root for all the other Big East teams when they are in it or no?
Yeah, for the most part, it's nice to see the conference teams win. Yeah, and I guess it depends on the matchups, which team it is. But for the most part, I'd say I root for all the Big East teams.
Yeah, I mean the Big East obviously is, you know, getting back to what it used to be. I feel like it kind of fell off for a bit and it's, in terms of just the competitiveness of the conference and obviously UConn leaving the conference and then coming back like
Yeah,
they made a really good decision coming back because I was so disappointed when they left. I was like why are you doing that?
yeah,
Because the Big East basketball is obviously so fun and now obviously this leads me into the last thing that I wanted to kind of get your
yeah,
opinion on, which is these new, the coaching adjustments now in the Big East. It was recently announced, like,
yeah. It's been
the other
crazy.
day that Rick Pitino going to St. John's and, Ed Cooley obviously leaving Providence to go to Georgetown. So the Big East from a coaching standpoint is pretty stacked. So what were your thoughts on all of that? Because
Yeah,
it all took place really close to each other.
Yeah, it did. I mean, Big East has like dominated the headlines the past, week and a half between how the teams have performed and now the coaching stuff. So all good news for the conference. I mean, I think it was kind of, you know, in the tea leaves already that Patino was going to end up at St. John's, and it just kind of seems like a natural fit. He's a New York guy through and through. And I think it's going to be really exciting to see what he can do at St. John's. I really think he's going to be able to do a good job there because he's succeeded everywhere he's gone. He's a really good coach. It'll be fun to see what happens there and make those games even more of a rivalry and a little bit more competitive. Will be nice. I mean, the cooling news kind of surprised me. It seems like it started to pick up that there were rumors of that lately, but still, see a coach go from one school within the conference to another, you don't really see that much, if ever there. So definitely very interesting to see that move. He obviously thinks, I guess, that Georgetown has a bit of a better ceiling, better facilities. I don't know. Definitely a little bit more money. But for a guy who's kind of Providence through and through, born and raised and all that stuff, you don't see those guys leave jobs like that very much. So definitely interesting. I'll be interested to see who ends up with Providence and see how that all works out. But no, it's been an exciting couple weeks here for the Big East and keeping them front and center in the news, which is always good.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about St. John's was even this season, I feel like obviously, overall they were one of the weaker teams in the conference, but they played teams tough in the
Yeah, they
conference.
weren't terrible. Yeah, they weren't terrible. They weren't, they weren't like a Georgetown or DePaulo. They're kind of stuck in the middle part there. Um, so you think you bring in Patino, he brings in some players, and the team hopefully should be able to take off relatively quickly for him.
Yeah, wherever he goes, like you said, he's going to succeed. He's just a legendary coach, which is why I was really nervous to face him in the first round.
Yeah,
And I think there were people who, put that as a potential upset in their brackets because,
for
you can
sure.
never really sleep on Patino because of how
Yeah,
great of a
no.
coach he is and the success he's had. So I was like, he's going to have that team prepared for UConn.
Yeah, anytime you got to go up against a guy who's already in the Hall of Fame, it's not an easy out.
I was like, I'm not feeling comfortable about having to face his team in the first round, especially just the region with the West region in general is just stacked. It's
Yeah,
just a tough,
it
tough
really
region because
is.
obviously if UConn wins this game, they'd get the winner of UCLA Gonzaga, which is probably the toughest matchup in my opinion that they might have to, you know,
Yeah,
play going forward if they do get there. So if they get when whoever, hopefully UConn wins tomorrow, whoever they play in the Elite Eight after that, that would be a tough game.
yeah, no, absolutely. I think the West, as soon as the brackets were released, where was the region I thought was going to be the toughest, and of course UConn was in that one.
I was like,
But so far, knock on wood, it's worked out for them, and hopefully they can continue to pull through this region.
I agree with you, and you'll see my mental freakouts that are reflected on Twitter as I'm watching the game tomorrow too. But this was a
Likewise,
lot of fun.
likewise.
I really appreciate you hopping on here with me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun talking UConn, college basketball, a lot of fun stuff going on.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Just before we go, just let everybody know where they can find you on social media and your podcast so that they can check it out and follow you.
Yeah, yeah, podcast is on all the major podcast players, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Google. I've got it everywhere. It's the Connecticut Scoreboard Podcast. Check it out on Twitter at CT Scoreboard Pod. I'm at Jared Kotler on Twitter. So yeah, check it out. Always really excited to talk UConn and all the stuff Connecticut. So thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And everybody, as always, thank you so much for tuning in to the show. I hope your brackets are doing better than mine. And hopefully, we'll be having some happy conversations about UConn, in April in a few
Yeah,
weeks. So fingers crossed on that. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week and enjoy all of the great basketball games that we're going to see this weekend. March Madness is the best time of the year. It's my favorite. So again, as always, thank you for tuning into the show. Have a great rest of your night, everybody, and I will catch you all next time.